Mahana kia koutou e tēnei ata. Is there anyone who's on karakia today? Grant, our usual roster champion. Have you? Oh, here we go. Nah, it's so good.
When I was about to do the closing one. Oh, crikey,
You can do
I think
either,
I'll
just
forget.
do one.
We can join in.
No, I'll try it. Yeah, okay. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā, kira ki uta, kia mā, taratara ki tai, e he aki ana, he akitukura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, he tihei.
Mauri ora. Ora, Vicky. That was off the top of the head. That's well done. Good work. Okay, I'll hand over to Emma and Taff, and we'll get into it. I know Alex is online, of course, and Jan and Dion. See you there. So over to you guys. Thank you.
I'll be in about 3 minutes.
Good morning, councillors. There we are.
I completely forgot what Oliver told me. Is it all good? It's working? Sweet, sorry. Just the live streaming and all that, but it's worked. Thanks, Oliver.
That's great. I can see Alex up there on the screen now, which is fantastic. So this is really Alex is going to be presenting here today and take you through an update on the work that we've done on revitalising the Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy, and that's ahead of it coming to the Strategy and Policy Committee next month, and then with the intent that if it's recommended there, that it comes to Council for adoption at the September meeting. So I will hand over to Alex to take you through the presentation.
Kia ora all. Quick sound check. Everyone can hear me?
Might just need to
Oliver's
volume
turned it
up a bit.
Turn me up. All good?
Yeah, that's good.
Wonderful. All right, cool. Sorry I'm not there in person to talk to you today, but as Emma's mentioned, I'm just going to walk through where we're at in terms of revitalising the Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy. It's a sort of follow-on from a lot of the ongoing reports that have been going into the Strategy and Policy Committee. And from my perspective, really keen to hear from councillors around some of the two key questions that we're posing in the back there in this workshop format. And workshopping is to hear from you around what you will need to be in a position at the Strategy and Policy Committee and Council meetings to consider an adoption process. And I guess the second question is more around some of the content or expectations you might want to see from the council's perspective. So I've got about a 10-minute roughly presentation to go through where I can talk through a lot of those issues and then hopefully some good workshop conversation at the end to support us as we reach the pointy end of this process. Yeah, so I think that's it. Emma's going to help me out with slides, so if there's a bit of lag between my talking and the slides, that's why. Thank you, Emma. All right, so I thought it'd be helpful just to quickly reflect back on what we've heard from Council and the committees previously. So we are at the very pointy end of a process to revitalise this strategy that Council endorsed 8 or so months ago now, the Strategy and Policy Committee endorsed 8 or so months ago now, which I acknowledge gave us some pretty tight timeframes for doing the revitalisation process. That commitment from the Strategy and Policy Committee was primarily around revitalising the strategy, not creating entirely new policy necessarily. So important to remember that this document has been live and part of Council's strategic context since 2008, and the work that we did to establish its effectiveness and efficiency indicated that it was still, in a lot of instances, fit for purpose. So the mantra of revitalisation has sort of been at the fore, and that decision to revitalise, not rewrite, has also contributed to our decisions around how we interact with our stakeholders and the consultation approaches that we've put in place. The Strategy and Policy Committee nominated 2 councillors, and that sort of representation has shifted a little bit over the course of the project. But those 2 councillors were nominated to provide Environment Canterbury's governance views into that wider stakeholder group conversation. So there was also, I guess, in that mix, in terms of representing Environment Canterbury's interests, a mixture of sort of expert staff, ecology, operations and science and strategy/policy representatives, all working alongside this broader stakeholder group to provide that perspective. The Strategy and Policy Committee also established the principles guiding the involvement of Environment Canterbury, staff and governance alike, and that included the list you can see there: working in partnership, maintaining our focus on protection as a guiding priority principle, being a collaborative process, working together alongside all of our other stakeholders and the Runanga to develop the strategy together, consistent and compliant with national direction and the sort of hierarchy of responsibilities, and the new landscape scale restoration vision, and I think that reflects really nicely alongside some of the requirements of the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, which talk about the need to have a landscape scale vision for restoration. So we embarked on this really strongly collaborative approach to revitalise the Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy, and I guess I'd like to acknowledge that that's a slightly different position for the councillors to have been in. Used to being a lot more hands-on developing Environment Canterbury policy, so I guess it's quite brave to push some of that work into the mahi and the thinking towards this broader group. But it's been a really positive cross-organisational, cross-individual experience that we've been able to run. And then the final sort of note around those previous decisions was the timeframes. So we've reported on the timeframes that we've been aiming towards into September at each of the Strategy and Policy Committees, and we're still on track to present some material to the September Strategy Policy Committee. So just a quick summary of the process that we've been undertaking. We initiated our revitalisation process very soon after the government finalised its National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity. We made that timing decision because we anticipated and were proved correct that the National Policy Statement would include directions for regional councils around the content and requirements for regional biodiversity strategies. So being able to wait for that policy statement to be in place has enabled us to do this in a way that's compliant with the government's expectations. Back in April last year, we hosted a preliminary discovery session with a whole range of different interested parties where we talked about this process, gauged interest from each of those organisations about whether they'd want to be involved, whether they'd want to see a repeat of the 2008 collaborative design process, and I guess used that information gathered from that group to formulate our approach. We then undertook some procurement to get some external support to help us do the strategy design and facilitation of workshops. And I'd, at this point, I guess, like to just put a big thank you out there to that project team that's come on board from Boffa Miskel. So Deb, Marpahi, Bronte and Anne in particular, thank you. They have sort of provided us a fantastic mix of support across those domains: policy design, with an engagement expertise, and facilitation of a really great series of workshops, which you can see is the next step there. So we've hosted 3 workshops over the last few months with absolute enormous variety of stakeholders. The initial strategy was designed with about 20 odd different organisations involved, and our invite list at various stages is extended to around about 80 different organisations and individuals to come along and sort of work with us as we develop this thing. Mixed attendance and availability of everybody to turn up, but definitely tried to cast the net wide in terms of that stakeholder network. And alongside that is the establishment of the Mana Whenua Advisory Group, and I'll talk about each of those 2 processes just in a moment. Behind the scenes, we've been doing a whole heap of technical work to update the context, the biodiversity information and current state updating threats, etc., as well as working on the sort of visual material to go alongside that strategy. And more recently, we're considering the establishment of some focus groups just to do a bit of broader community testing with the community about how this revitalised strategy is looking and whether it meets the needs of the general community as well as all of the sort of stakeholder experts that we've been bringing together. We've undertaken regular council committee reporting to keep you up to speed, acknowledging that not all of you are directly in the mix of creating this strategy. And we've also done slightly lighter updates through various other forums of progress. So that includes the Mayoral Forum, through the Canterbury Biodiversity Champions, and through Te Rauputuria. This sort of shows the content that's been the content from the previous slide, just in a slightly different way for your understanding of the timing and otherwise. In red there, you can see that I've highlighted just some of the changes and the new work that maybe since the last time you saw a picture that looked quite like this. So initially we had forecast for 4 workshops, but we heard from our stakeholders that the time constraints and travel constraints around those workshops were restrictive to them. So we condensed the number but extended the duration. So we've had three pretty substantial workshops with those stakeholders, as well as looking into establishing this new focus group approach towards the end of the process. And you can see all of the various different content development components ultimately contributing to our revitalisation process.
Oh, you're frozen, Alex, but hopefully... Oh, there you go. You're back now. There you go.
Back. I'll ultimately end up in front of council. So same slide, just in a slightly different format. Just one, thank you. So I thought just also handy to talk about some of the various different components of collaborative strategy design process. And one of the really wonderful ones has been the establishment of the Mana Whenua Advisory Group. So we approached each of the runanga really early on in a process to establish what degree of interest and capacity they had to be involved in this process. And ultimately, the project team worked with the runanga to hear from them exactly how they want to be in the mix here, and establish this sort of runanga-led approach to involvement. So it's kind of a tiered approach. Some of the runanga are really, really interested in this mahi and really keen to be part of setting and helping design the strategy approach, and they've provided some resourcing to facilitate that. Others are sitting back a little bit and just hearing the various different reporting that we're doing to that group, but there's space for each of the runanga there to be involved in our revitalisation process exactly in the way that they desire. I just note that while it's been a really collaborative working space, the runanga are keen to identify that this is not a true co-authorship approach, that sitting alongside us, assisting the strategy team, providing Ngāi Tahu perspectives into the work, but not claiming a full co-authorship. I guess the other really interesting thing is to see the focus areas from each of the runanga, what the primary areas of contribution that they're wishing to push into the strategy are, and they're listed there. It's around the Ngāi Tahu chapter, updating and incorporating water issues, and then also really, really focused on the restoration of opportunities to do customary harvest and mahinga kai, and how that connects to species abundance. So as we start to finalise the process with the Mana Whenua Advisory Group, we're seeing more and more content coming through to support our strategy that reflects those perspectives. I'd just also like to quickly point out the requirement in the NPS as well here about working with tangata whenua as partners. So working with tangata whenua to the extent they wish to be involved in partners of management of Indigenous biodiversity, including strategy development. And I think we've done a good job of making sure that we're really holding true to that requirement, as well as our broader and meaningful partnership responsibilities under Te Tiriti. The second arm of our engagement has been around the stakeholder workshops process. So really broad, extensive membership. Like I said earlier, we cast the net really wide to see how many different organisations, individuals and community groups we could bring into the fold to help us shape the revitalised biodiversity strategy workstream. We've, I guess, acknowledging that we don't have infinite time to run this process, tried to be really quite focused with those groups and make the best use of their time by using the workshopping portions to reconfirm what elements of the strategy remain valid and can continue sort of largely unchanged. Workshopping and revitalising a vision that's more contemporary and reflects the requirements in the NPS. And then connected to that vision, how we're going to achieve it. So workshopping and revitalising the goals and actions that underpin the strategy component. So there's been a iterative approach throughout the 3 workshops that we've hosted where we continue to reflect back and refine in on each of those components. We use the external facilitations to ensure that we sat alongside that group of stakeholders, alongside them as participants in this process, rather than trying to dominate the process. And that's been a really successful approach to getting that cross organisational collaboration here. And I think one reflection is that the network that's been created through the establishment of this stakeholder workshop is something that could potentially persist into the future as a really interested, engaged and expert network of people who are actively engaged in delivering biodiversity across the region. We've had approximately 15 hours of workshop time with each of those group over the past few months. So when you multiply that by the number of attendees, the amount of time and effort that people have provided to assist us with this process is quite remarkable. And I just acknowledge their contributions, both them and the Manawhānau Advisory Group, for being willing to sit in there and listen to us and work alongside us as we've done this development strategy revitalisation process. And then finally, the last more recent thing we're trying to do is address a bit of a participation gap in our wider sort of community expectations and understanding around the biodiversity. Awesome input from the Runanga, awesome input from a range of different biodiversity experts. And I think just wanting to make sure that we've got something that resonates more broadly, we're looking at how we can send some of the revitalised strategy components into a bit of a focus group session to better understand those community perspectives. And that, yeah, as you can see there, across 3 main groups that are maybe a bit underrepresented in our groups, and those are some focus group around urban biodiversity, marine and coastal biodiversity, and those engaged with agriculture and rural biodiversity. So that's a work in progress. I don't have a huge amount to say about that at the moment, but I will be able to report about that to you at the Strategy Policy Committee. I think also useful to reflect on where all that process has taken us in terms of the strategy development. So I guess this is where the key areas of change are progressing in terms of the revitalisation. And I think the first and most important one to note, and it's really guided some of the content of the draft strategy that we've presented to you, is that the National Policy Statement has created a space where there's a much stronger role for Council for Environment Canterbury to be taking leadership in regional biodiversity issues and in developing the strategy and actions. So there is a bit more of an inherent bias towards Environment Canterbury in that, just by nature of the requirement for us to own and deliver it. We've incorporated an ongoing process to include all of the Manawhānau Advisory Group contributions, and particularly in those key areas that I reflected on earlier. There's a lot of interest in creating a slightly more streamlined, useful document, and taking on that feedback from the group. We're also considering how we can present the strategy on a page, something that's much easier for someone to just pick up and utilise and understand at a glance, rather than needing to pour through the entire, albeit useful, amount of information contained in the broader strategy. And I think reflecting on that again, also trying to pare back some of the strategy as a whole and complement it with other elements that can be updated more regularly in a live way in another format. So information and otherwise about the state of biodiversity sitting alongside that biodiversity strategy, but much more live. We're explaining the current changes to this process and how we've undertaken the revitalisation from 2008. We're updating the relevant biodiversity information as a sort of snapshot of the current state of biodiversity. Obviously has changed a little since 2008. Updates in changes to the challenges and opportunities. And again, I've noted where that in particular came from the workshopping that we've done. That was a key subject from that workshop. And then from the second and third workshop, that goals and actions component. So what are we hoping to achieve and how are we going to do it? The meat on the bones of this strategy document and where it will really lead us in future. And then there's a sort of process of sense checking and alignment against other Environment Canterbury policies and strategies, as well as all of the various different local government biodiversity strategies that have been developed since 2008. And there's a growing list of those, which is really wonderful to see each of the territorial authorities taking on that local leadership role for biodiversity. The last one, I think, from me before we jump into some questions or some comments from you, and that's about, well, what are we hoping to do next? So we have got a couple of questions, as I mentioned earlier, to help support us to support this process, and we'll deliver that today. We then have an ongoing final few meetings of our Mana Whenua Advisory Group, continuing to support some content development, and they're happening on a mostly weekly basis for the next month or so as we continue to finalise this work. We'll be doing the technical work, and that will include updating the strategy from what we heard from our last workshop, as well as anything we might need to do in response to what we hear from you today, and that will carry on into August, as will the updates to the strategy generally. And then we are aiming still for the Strategy and Policy Committee decision to recommend it to Council on the 7th of September, with the intent that Council will be able to make a decision to adopt it on the 14th of September. And I've added the word content there just to set the expectation. We will probably not be in a position to present a beautiful, glossy, graphic designed document. That process is going to happen, but in terms of the content development, that's the priority, and that's what the Strategy Policy Committee and Council will be asked to consider. So following a decision to adopt, if that is indeed taken, then the strategy will be beautified, and then a phase of action planning and action delivery supported by the sort of financial and other requirements that we might need to do to deliver on this strategy will follow, and again form part of that living document landscape. And then we'll also need to do the appropriate communication with our stakeholders and the wider community around the revitalisation of this document. So I think that's it from me in terms of context and background. I'm happy to take questions, but I'm also really keen to hear from you in relation to those two questions I've posed before. But wherever we get to, I'll take some notes and make sure that whatever we hear from you ends up in that conversation that the project team has in terms of designing the strategy. So thank you very much, and I guess over to you to workshop one or two of those questions there.
Thanks, Alex. Emma, you wanted to jump in?
Thank you, Chair. I just thought it would be, looking at the two questions, I think it'd be worthwhile if we start with the second question and just get your feedback on what Alex has presented. And we met with some of the councillors yesterday, so we have got some feedback that we're looking to incorporate, but now is the opportunity really to, hear your feedback and just open it up, and Alex and I will kind of capture that and respond to that.
Thanks, Emma. Look, I think we'll get onto that in a second, but first of all, we just might have some questions, clarification about the presentation, and then we'll jump into this question in a minute. Ian, is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Craig. Alex, how much is what other thoughts we might have about engaging with things, and it occurred to me in that conversation that whether there was a skew towards native habitat as opposed to modified habitat, to which our native biodiversity has adapted. And I wondered if so I'd be interested in your comments as to whether you see this biodiversity strategy has thought seriously about the significantly modified habitat to which are native, and so it might be black stilts under centre pivots in the Mackenzie country, I know we had a family of pied stilts that laid their eggs and reared their young inside our effluent retaining tank, so we couldn't use it for that whole period. But they were safe from predators in there, and when the 6 babies flew away, it was all good. And I know herons like hanging out on water troughs, and mudfish like hanging out in drains where it's unsuitable habitat for trout. So I just wondered how much, perhaps so.
Thanks, Ian. Really good question, really good point. I don't know if you can answer that, Alex, but if you can, go for it.
At a high level, yes, I can say that. The focus of this work stream has really been around Indigenous biodiversity and protection, and that's following on from those sort of council committee decisions. So I guess that's the driving sort of force behind a lot of what we've been considering, and we actually heard that reflected from everyone in the room around the stakeholder groups as well. That said, you can't ignore exactly what you've raised there. A lot of our Indigenous biodiversity has had to adapt to modified environments. So that's certainly something we can take away and consider. I want to say it's been incorporated already, but I can double check and see how well we have accounted for those instances where our Indigenous biodiversity has had to adapt and respond to changes in circumstances.
If I can just have a follow-up to that. I mean, and I have been thinking about this, but it seems to me that if you are serious about, encouraging biodiversity and a high proportion of our landscape is modified, then actually incorporating into the strategy some sort of survey as to what modified landscapes are suitable for various types of native flora and fauna. Well, not so much flora, but certainly our fauna. And that might be a useful reflection, given you've got urban landscapes and highly modified rural landscapes.
I think it's a really good point, Ian. I mean, obviously we've had the same thing here in Christchurch with the black-beaked gulls living in the black-billed gulls living in the car park depression in the ground in one of the demolished buildings. So I think it is a really good point, and maybe it could be put into the actions part of the strategy, where there's a specific action about doing an investigation about exactly what you said. I think that's a really valid point, so thanks, Ian. Yep, Genevieve.
Yeah, it is a valid point, because I was just thinking, environments like the estuary changes as well, and the species that wouldn't normally use that area are using that area, and it's interesting to know why. My question with regards to the process from here on in is more, sorry, I don't know where to look because you're on the screen, Alex, but I think it's really great that Mana Whenua are having weekly meetings at this stage, to sort of really get things into the final detail. I'm just wondering what the appropriateness would be for the councillors here that are part of the oversight group would have similar, or at least some engagement to that detail we're getting to, so we don't sort of lose traction somewhere. Weekly, a quick brief of 15 minutes even to see what's happening in that process. So, yeah.
Absolutely,
if
we can.
Work with governance to sort that out for sure.
Cool. Thank you. Peter.
Thanks. Look, I'll qualify what I'm about to say because I haven't been involved in this at all, actually. But my understanding from the NPS Indigenous biodiversity is that the regional council role, and this is my understanding of it, is to provide direction and coordination across the TA authorities who's got more of a responsibility for natural areas and biodiversity on the land. So that's my understanding of this. Alex, my question to you is that, for clarification, I mean, you mentioned that this will come for support, looking for support from S&P and then go to adoption from Council in September. And the thing that, maybe you can clarify this, the thing that disturbed me a little was that we won't have a full banquet of costs associated with that until after we've endorsed it. So I'm just wondering, is that what you meant? Or do we know how much this is going to cost?
You mean implement, Peter? You mean to implement the strategy?
Yeah, the disturbing thing was, hey, we're going to put this in front of you, and it's a blank check. I mean, that's how I understood it, but it may not be right. I'm just trying to clarify that.
Yeah, I think if you look at the Braided River revival strategy and the gravel management strategy, I mean, they're not costed out either. There is a 30-year infrastructure strategy behind some of that, but yeah, most of the strategies we do aren't costed out. I mean, but I actually think it's a really important point, because it's something I have pushed for the whole time, that we do actually get to the point where we have costed out what it is going to take to implement it. But you've highlighted something when you first talked, Peter, because it is a shared responsibility, isn't it, between us and TAs? I mean, it's quite clear that in the MPSIB, our key roles are the regional strategy and monitoring. So there are two key roles that are specifically for regional councils. The rest of them are quite shared. There are some TA authority, TA responsibilities directly, and then the rest of the wording is local authorities. So it's both of us.
Can I suggest then, Craig,
I'll put your button on. Yep.
Yeah, given what you've said, okay, because that sort of clarifies what I'm trying to get at too, because if it is one of those things and it is a partnership across Runanga and TAs and others, then the expectation is that they will do their bit in this too. And if the costs are clarified in terms of how we do that, then they can look at those. So a piece of work possibly for the new council?
Well, I actually do think it is important in the context of signing off a strategy that we do have an idea of what we currently do and what the current LTP provides for. And I think we did raise this yesterday with staff. As well as we can do a small reflection on what TAs are doing, because through the Biodiversity Champions Group, we do have that information. We know how many district councils have biodiversity staff, for example. We know how many of them have funds, and we know how many of them have done their own strategy. So we could reflect that, I think. I think it is important to note that in the strategy, or at least in the paper that comes to us. So we have that.
Be quite strong on the fact that this is expected to be done.
Yep. Yeah, and because of the MPS, it is a statutory role. Yep. Nook.
Kia ora, mihi atu. First of all, I thank you, Alex, for this presentation. And it was important that we listened to this, particularly after yesterday's Regs committee meeting. I think the important thing is, and you've actually quoted quite a number of times this morning about the vital success of the strategy. A lot of it is actually based on mana whenua input and the mana whenua advisory groups, and pretty much about bringing guidance of mātauraka Māori principles, kaitiakitanga, to ensure that the restoration work actually honours the whakapapa between people, land, and also the water. The interesting thing is that I did give way on being one of the councillors involved in this with Councillor Robinson, and I gave way to Councillor Edge because more so about his experience and expertise in this field. And I've watched this actually from the outside. And again, it comes back to around the cultural knowledge, which is mātauraka Māori, and also science. And so, again, I come back to the situation here is that how does that actually, within the strategy, how do we combine the two of them? Because one of the concerns from the advisory group, a number of the advisory group, is that the knowledge that they're giving, and then there is the the science sort of part of it. So mātauraka Māori science combined. How's that actually incorporated, into the strategy? So a lot of it was, hey, we're giving you our kind of cultural knowledge, and then the combination of the two of them in what actually comes out at the end. And I think Councillor Robinson actually hit it on the head, is that it'd be really good to get an idea about where this thing is going, and I'm particularly around Mātauraka Māori and the Māori advisory groups. That's that one, and then it's Peter, Councillor Scott actually brought something up that was another question that they had, particularly around the funding of this, and particularly around the advisory groups, the way, and what's the process, particularly around governance, what more so around the advisory groups, what sort of power that they have in making decisions to make sure that it goes through. So anyway, there's a few questions in there, but I think the main one is about Mātauraka Māori and science.
Cool. Alex,
I think that I can give it a go. I think that the best way to explain what's happening here is that there's a variety of different ways that the input from the Mana Whenua Advisory Group and the broader project and stakeholder team are being incorporated. In some places, it's direct. So in relation to, for example, the Ngāi Tahu chapter and the Ngāi Tahu narratives and description of Tonga species or all of those components, they're coming direct from that Mana Whenua Advisory Group, and more or less, aside from some help with proofreading or beyond those sorts of things, that they are going to form the strategy content, and that's been directly driven from those Mana Whenua Advisory Groups. Other components are more interwoven, making sure that, and working alongside that Mana Whenua Advisory Group to make sure that the various different issues, opportunities, priorities, etc., are seen throughout the strategy, and that might not be as direct and obvious as an inclusion as in the other place, but certainly it's a process of our policy design, working with that Mana Whenua group to sense check the policy and the strategy that we're developing. So I guess, twofold answer there. Some stuff is direct, word for word. Some stuff is how do we weave the contributions from the Mana Whenua Advisory Group alongside our existing strategy and all of the information we've heard from our stakeholders, many of whom do have a Western science sort of background.
Can I just one more? So the whole, and I get what you're saying, but the essence to them was that how is the collective kind of group's advice? How's that incorporated into the council or the agency decision-making processes? Because they put all this, all this sort of knowledge into the mix. But then from there, and I suppose this is where the strategy is going, is how do we actually then incorporate that into our real decision-making about our biodiversity strategy? Yeah.
I mean, assuming a strategy is eventually adopted as an end result of this process, it then becomes the council's prerogative to make sure that it's giving effect to the vision, goals and actions that it's attempting to support, and all of the contributions that have gone into getting us there. So in the same way that we seek to implement all of our sort of strategic and planning documents, we have to keep this in mind as part of our decision-making process, and it's incumbent, I guess, on decision makers to make sure that that strategy input that they've received and then the things that they have been aware of are relevant for the region continue to form part of the basis of decision making.
Yeah, that's really good. Because
as well as staff, I suppose, to be aware of the policies and strategic landscape that we're operating in and make good recommendations to you as councillors.
Yeah, and it's really good because with this here, what comes out of this will be part of the cultural audit as well, so that we actually can measure that this is actually taking place, and that's the idea of the cultural audit.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I got Claire and Grant on the list, and just mindful. I think we are answering this question actually. So if we keep going, and then whatever we have left over, we'll continue on this question. So Claire and then Grant.
Thank you, Alex, for updating us. Like Nook, this is the first time I've really sort of probably taken a degree of notice of what's been presented because I haven't been involved. But I sort of want to go back to Peter's question really around our role, and it was clearly stated by you, Chair, that it's strategy and monitoring, and that's fine.
Sorry, Claire, there is a few others that I forgot to mention. We also have a role around highly mobile fauna, vegetation cover, and assessing and setting targets for that. Yeah, they were the other two. There's a few others too.
I guess I go back to the slide earlier on around mana whenua's concerns or priorities around the interaction between freshwater, climate change, rivers, and that, and you know that's our business in the wider community is also extremely interested in that, and the interface or the interaction. I'm not seeing from my reading of this and some the goals or even the action plans, how that interaction with the other work that we have as core functions sit. And if I just think about the land and water space, or the water and land space, I'm not sure which way it is around in the organisation. Here, at the moment, and you know, Peter talked about the funding. There is an awful imbalance, and I think that I would like to see some sort of balancing up and some more clarity around that interaction of our policies. Because at the moment, this to me is ECAN's doing a hell of a lot of the heavy lifting here, and I'm just wondering whether we could actually spread some of this work a bit more. And I hear that we have some responsibilities, and that's fine. But yeah, I mean, for example, I looked at the goals and I thought, oh, there's nothing in the original goals or targets about incentivising things. In other words, could we do rates relief for QE2 landholders or things like that? And then you go down to the action plans, which is there. Under ECAN, it's got that we can do that. Well, I know that Waimakariri, for example, has already got an incentive scheme around trading off biodiversity or for subdivision and rates relief type things. So I would particularly like to see a bit more balance. At the moment, it feels that like this is our centre of our focus for Environment Canterbury, or Canterbury Regional Council, and it isn't. Important part, but not sun that everything spins around.
As I understand it, Claire, the way the actions have been drafted up at the moment is because we are leading the strategy, so we feel most confident in saying what we can do in terms of extracting that out of their other partners, TAs and others. That's a bit harder at the moment because we haven't actually asked them to volunteer that just yet, but that's something that does need to be done. And you'll see most of those actions sort of talk about us and the TAs in the same breath, because we know we are working with them through biodiversity champions and others. We know there is work going on. So I think what's come out today, again to Peter's question, similar to yours, Claire, is we must reflect that in the strategy somehow. We must show what we're doing already. And I agree, linking it to the other work we do, and this has come up around the table over the last few years around our biosecurity and biodiversity work, bringing that together in a more clear sense so that councillors understand that, and I think the wider public should too. So I think that's a really important point about showing that in the strategy, because we are doing a lot, but it's not always that visible. So I think that's a really good point. Thanks, Claire. Grant, and then I've got Liam online.
So, I'm okay to make some comments on this question too.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we're into that really because we've been doing it the whole way through.
Given where I think that the document is at the moment in terms of the strategy, I think there's still some way to go. In terms of the funding question and the actions, I think the strategy is about a long-term vision. If I look at the current one, it's got some goals, it's got a vision, and it's got some targets, whatever. And then there's some actions. And the current thing describes some actions and a whole lot of people who would be involved in delivering those actions. And what's missing in my mind is some further elaboration of that actions process. And I think it would be wrong to put what we're doing now in an actual strategy. A strategy is about going forward in the future, but it almost needs to be a document that is a living document between LTPs and annual plans, and interagency stuff, territorial authorities, that that they respond in different ways to some slightly high-level actions, if you like. So you've got an action, and then there's some facilitation about who delivers those, coordination, and those sort of, and I think that is a really key role of Environment Canterbury in terms of providing that overarching collaborative process to achieve the visions and achieve the targets. And I don't think that that's quite developed yet. My main concern is about the approach to the Section 8 goals and targets, and I think it's been underworked a wee bit.
Thanks, Grant.
Talk about the goals, in terms of where we're going on a spatial planning or spatial, the strategy on a page. I open the existing document and it's there, it's on a page. Goal 1 has targets identified, it has performance indicators, and then right next to it is some actions, all on a page. That's the goal, these are the targets to achieve the goal, and these are the actions that need to be taken to do that. I just can't at the moment see the interrelationships between the goals. It's got goal 1, and then it has targets, but there's the relationship between goal 1 and the targets is still slightly underdeveloped. But it's the logic of that whole process in the strategy. I haven't really looked a lot at the narrative part. But once the strategy is there, it is going to be people looking at goals, targets, actions, who does what, when, and for how much. And I'm not picking that up at the moment.
Thanks, Grant. I understand that we are looking at, and that's what we pointed to before and what Peter raised as well, about a sort of next stage of documentation around implementation. That's what I understand may happen. So some of that could be in there, but as long as this strategy points to that and spells that out, that's going to happen, I think that is important. I think the point about the collaborative process is quite important. And again, that's why I think the reflection of what we are currently doing is important. Even though that's not the be-all and end-all, we've still got to say what we currently are doing, and in our long-term plan, what we've committed to for the next 10 years at least. I think that's important. That doesn't say that limits that, and that's all that's ever going to happen. But I think we've got to say that, and also what we have done since 2008. I think it's important to actually note that. And I think about indicators, the performance indicators that may be in the current document, I think in a way that might be an issue too, because we probably haven't actually monitored them, to be honest. And I don't see a report that says performance indicators, how we've gone against the 2008 performance indicators. I've never seen a report along those lines. But I think that is part of the trick going forward, that we do have a set of indicators that can be measured every year by this council and by our community. If we don't, then I'd say what's the point? So I think that is really important. I've highlighted that in some of the feedback I've given already. So thanks, Grant. Liam, online, and sorry I didn't acknowledge you before, Liam.
No, that's okay. Sorry, I'm just about like what the council's kind of fiscal ability to provide on these goals were, because it was kind of a conversation in the last workshop around like how ambitious can we be? Like, can we go and say we want to do like this, and this, or are we limited to doing only a couple things? So I think that was just kind of a point that I was thinking about earlier. And on Section 8, just to kind of sort of answer Grant's point a little bit, was that like even in the workshop, it's been updated from what the document that we have here. So I think it's potentially a little bit unclear on what councillors might have right now, because I'm looking at a goal 3 that looks different to what is on the working draft that you guys have in front of you. So potentially those workshop documents might be good if they can get circulated to councils if they don't already have them. On goal 3, I think it's the most important for youth. And we've got a heading here on the working draft that talks about enhancing public awareness. I think potentially like the most beneficial rephrasing is something along the lines of like empowering community action, because I think a lot of young people want to get involved with supporting biodiversity, and that's talked about in the actions. ECAN will support environmental education programs, but a lot of the actions are talking about what's already happening, and there doesn't seem to be a correlation with the actions and the outcomes. We're talking about wider recognition, increased visibility, but if we're doing the same things, we're not going to get improved outcomes. And so what I'm looking for there is like maybe potentially like expanding on the actions that we're already doing. It was some conversations that came up in the workshop around the biodiversity action groups, and the youth ROPU is currently trying to increase youth voice within those biodiversity action groups. So really like trying to support those more, and potentially having some specific action points around how you support those groups and get youth voices on those groups, and generally within education and community volunteering. So I guess there's no question there, but those are some points that I had, especially around goal 3 of the strategy.
Kia ora, Liam. Hey, I really think that's a great point, because if you look at goal 5, it's about improving quality of knowledge and information, which is actually pretty similar to public awareness and education. And I like the focus on action, because I think even in the rural community and in the urban communities, that's what people are doing, like catchment collectives. We've got the groups in Huranui now, Waimakariri, down in Ashburton. They're all doing work and they want to do action on the ground. So I think that is a really, really good point, because the difference between goal 3 and goal 5 at the moment are quite the same. Well, they're quite similar, but you could make goal 3 quite different in terms of action. So I think that's a really good comment. Thank you. Any other? We're almost done, but I think it's been a good...
Can I just...
Yep. Here we go, Liam.
Can I just make a follow-up on that? Is that when we were talking about in the workshop, I think the distinction that we had between goal 3 and goal 5 was that, like, if you look at goal 3, it's more talking about, like, me and my mates who don't have a degree in biodiversity, environmental science, going down and like doing a beach cleanup. Whereas goal 5 is talking about very much, okay, you've got your GIS data, you're going to a farmer, you're providing them with that thing. So very much action focus for both of them, but I think there's a different goal in who you're trying to reach potentially there, where goal 3 is very much for youth, maybe.
And I think, goal 3 could have awareness and action. So that's another way to do it. So have both. And you see down the bottom there, more frequent public engagement, but it could be and action. So there's just ways to do it. So it covers both of those angles. So thank you, Liam. Anyone? Yep, Vicky.
So under 8.2 for targets, it does say in the yellow box that the final landing point will be informed by the feedback we hear on the goals and actions. I think from the workshops, it sounds like that's where Liam's a step ahead of us. So it would be really good to get where that's landing and what a summary of what was heard. I don't know if that's going to come through in some notes or what, but it would be helpful to sort of hear what was heard and how that's then influenced from what we've got here to what staff are subsequently recommending. And of course today's input will also form up some of that. I think I've got a comment about the sort of specificity of things. So it's sort of, I'm not clear if we've got like a baseline and that we're going to be measuring against and then going, checking on that, or whether there needs to be an action about actually setting the baseline like we've done with our service measures in our long-term plan. So just making sure that we need to know where we're at and then a plan of how we're going to monitor forward. I did wonder whether an action to something around. So I know we're doing some good pilot studies. So something about Environment Canterbury will investigate and demonstrate through pilot studies innovative methods for increasing Indigenous biodiversity, something like that, because that is something that we do, but it could be noted. There's quite a lot in the actions that are sort of like encourage, promote, investigate, not as clear cut. Like some of those, I think the investigates could actually be will report on, like there's an investigation required in order to then deliver a report which feeds through to some actions, but you just investigate, you can sort of sit in the background and not do anything further. In a way, I think the ongoing actions do capture what we currently are doing. I think that's what they're trying to do, is capturing what we're currently doing and then looking to say, this is going to continue because this is important. And we do put, we had that briefing that highlighted how much we put towards biodiversity and biosecurity for that purpose as well. So it would be good to capture that aspect. And I think that's what the ongoing part is. It would be really helpful, and this is just sort of the layout type of thing, but in the current strategy, the actions are numbered, so you can then reference them. So I want to go, for example, Ian's comment, there is something about modified environments and working with industry to develop minimum industry standards, for example. It's what I would call action 4, but it's not numbered 4. There's no method to report or to clearly communicate. And then my docs and tap has just gone blank. In terms of the actions, so I'll just memorise. In terms of the actions, there was an actions in the current biodiversity strategy. There's a column that says who, and so that can then get populated. Because we talked in the meeting we had yesterday, talked about possibly having a mechanism whereby as people are becoming signatories, they can put forward what they're going to do as their contribution to this, and that gets added in. So that's where a live document part to this sits. And if we have a column that's identifying the who split out from the whole action, at the moment it's all lumped together, the who, the what, the why, split them out, and then new signatories can get populated into that, the who part. And so in time, it looks like it's not just on us. But at the moment, if we're signing off, we can only really sign off on what we do, because that's the only thing we can have true confidence in at this point. Just some things about dates. So I think it says year 1. It needs to be a date, because year 1s can just sort of, I think, again, that comes to my specificity. And I think that... Yeah, and ultimately something like a 30-year implementation strategy, like we have for the flood stuff, would be a great thing to have as the next steps. And I think some of those next steps, and we talked about that as well, will need to be really clearly signalled. Yeah.
Thanks, Vicky. Some of your comments are pretty similar to mine, really. I think I'm really keen to get that specificity as well. I think, as Grant said as well, the logic around how the goals and actions and stuff flow together, and I think the numbering and that is actually important. So that people can refer to them. And I like the idea of signatories being able over time to be able to identify what actions they want to help with and almost like pledge to help with that. I think that's a really good idea. My main thing has really been about metrics and data and evidence, and I want to see that like in there. But I also think goals, action targets, like Grant said, up front, and the narrative and the evidence and data can be to back that up, rather than the other way around. Like, don't load the narrative at the front and then get the goals and that at the back. Do it the other way around. That's my suggestion, because people will want to go straight to what is he going to do about it, people, rather than tell us why it's so bad and all this. Like, do it the other way around. And I also think that I can't see at the moment like a sort of a catchment sort of district analysis or approach. That's sort of a bit missing, but maybe that has to come later because we can't quite do that yet. But I just think that's something that has to be considered, because we do know that, I can't remember the numbers, Alex, but at least 4 or maybe 5 districts do have a district biodiversity strategy. So somehow we need to reflect that. We can't not say it, I don't think. So that's another thing that we just need to at least acknowledge that they've got them and refer to them, and then that can cascade from there. So thanks everybody. Thanks for the feedback, and I hope that's been really helpful for the team. And I know that it is under time pressure, but it's great that we're at this stage of it, and people have been able to give their feedback. So thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to say to finish off?
No, other than just, thank you. That's been really useful. We've got quite a bit there to take away and do something with. And I think, we've picked up a lot of it around the funding and the actions and what actually we present as part of the overarching strategy, and then what part of it could be more of a living document, given that this is a very shared and collaborative approach. And I think that that's kind of a realistic way of actually delivering on it. But we will take that all away and continue to work closely with staff over this next critical 4 weeks. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. We've got a little break now till 10:15. We'll be back then. Thanks, Alex, too.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, kia ora koutou. Just getting ready to come back into our briefing session today. We've got a bit of a biodiversity theme this morning, which is really awesome. So we'll restart and we'll welcome our team to the table. I know we've got Carl. Are the others coming up, or just others to help with just Carl and Tim, maybe? Yep. And so this workshop here, so we're actually having a workshop breakout session in this one. We're going to have 10 minutes to start with from Carl and the team, and then we're going to break into 3 or 4 groups and have 20-minute discussion, 10 minutes each on 2 topics, and then we'll come back and do a bit of a summary of what we came up with about, and this is all about the Christchurch District Biodiversity Targeted Rate. So I'll hand over to the team. There you go. Thank you, Tim.
Kia ora, Paul, and kia ora koutou, kia ora, Craig, sorry. Kia ora, Craig. Let me start again.
That's all right, Dave. Oh, good.
Kia ora, Craig.
Kia ora, Tim.
And look, the first thing that I just want to do is acknowledge Mahanui Kuratayo, staff from Mahanui Kuratayo who are in the room, and we've got Kelly, Grace and Matt who have been involved in this kaupapa, so just to acknowledge that. And as has just been said, this is about the Christchurch Biodiversity Rate, targeted rate, and you will recall that yesterday we were talking about how it has been spent in the last year, and now we're wanting to talk about what we'll do from year 2 to year 10 in the long-term plan. Part of the work that has been done during the first year was to really work out a good and effective way of delivering that targeted rate for biodiversity in the Christchurch area. So I'll hand straight on to Carl, who's going to talk us through a little bit, and then we've got some questions that we want to deal with, and well, I'll hand on to Carl.
Kia ora koutou. I'll just perhaps start off with a little bit of reiterating what Chair Pauling covered off in terms of the overview. So today really is, we've got 45 minutes. We're going to be going through it pretty swiftly. It's going to start off with a 10-minute presentation, which I'll try and get through as fast as possible. We're then going to break out into groups of 3 or 4. There will be a group online in a separate room, which Jude will be the facilitator for there. We're going to be covering off 2 key questions, 10 minutes per question. Tim will be helping out with the timing of that and making sure that we all keep to time, followed by a bit of a summary of the key themes from that and into a 10-minute open discussion. So the long-term plan didn't actually set out a clear purpose for the targeted rate. However, we've taken from listening to the various conversations on the targeted rate the purpose to be to deliver landscape-scale biodiversity protection and restoration across the Christchurch district. Fundamental to the success of this is a community-centric approach, which you will see throughout this presentation. Year 1 is now complete and was covered off in the paper I provided to the Regional Delivery Committee yesterday. Year 1 saw us deliver what we consider to be the most efficient and outcome-focused work program at short notice, while taking the time to develop a long-term strategic approach. In brief, this included the 400k to the Community Contestable Fund, 220k direct support for high-value biodiversity projects, 220k for grant funding for permanent protection by covenants, and 115k foundational work for future years. Today we're discussing the foundational work and our approach to future years. To enable this process, we engaged an external consultant, Marie Long. Marie came with extensive experience in the space, having held multiple Director and Deputy Director General roles at DOC, including the role of Deputy Director General Biodiversity. Marie brought an independent view to the strategy, had existing contacts in the industry and community, and was able to have informed discussions with those people and groups she engaged with throughout the process. Marie Long and her team were contracted to work directly with the community and Runanga. Marie was tasked with ensuring that our partners in our community were at the heart of our approach, ensuring that their voices came through. Marie Long was asked to deliver on a 3-stage approach, which included undertaking a learnings review, completion of a strategic framework, and a tactical plan providing our operational team with implementation direction. The 3 associated documents will be provided to you via governance after this briefing, should you be interested in further reading associated with our future approach. Mana whenua and the community were actively involved in the formation at each stage, and we'll briefly take you through the 3 stages before opening up a discussion on key parts of our proposed approach to obtain feedback from yourselves to enable a finalised plan and enable operations to commence years 2 through 10. Our consultant Marie Long reached out to all known community groups within the district. Unfortunately, not all community groups engaged. Marie did undertake interviews with 9 community groups, along with Mahanui Kurataio Limited, Christchurch City Council, the Department of Conservation and ECAN staff. Ngāti Wheki and Onuku were also directly involved. She then held 2 workshops, bringing community groups, Mana whenua, CCC, DOC and ECAN together to discuss potential approaches to delivery. In many cases, multiple conversations occurred with individual community groups and consultation happened with all parties throughout the process. The input of these individuals on behalf of their groups had a direct impact on each stage of the process, and the ultimate end result as we adapted an approach that aligned as well as possible with the desires of Mana whenua and the community. One thing that came through is a lot of money. It's also only a drop in the bucket in terms of investment required for long-term to ensure that that biodiversity thrives within the Christchurch district long-term. Ultimately, the takeaway being we have to be smart to ensure we are being as effective and efficient as possible. To achieve this, we need to move away from the scattergun approach and move towards aligning the community to achieve landscape scale change. The community want to be aligned. We see part of our role through this process being to help this alignment and to enable collective contribution towards landscape outcomes, enabling the individual groups to take the lead where possible and provide a transparent way to achieve this. Stage 1 being the completion of the learnings review. The purpose of this learnings review was to provide us with foundational understanding of the current approach to biodiversity in the district, including any existing gaps and any potential opportunities for improvement. We did this by engaging with community groups and mana whenua already working in this space. Some of the key insights that came out of that review are outlined on this slide. The report also included 10 recommendations, all of which are reflected in the strategic framework and tactical plan. Those recommendations were to establish a clear strategic and governance framework, to adopt a hybrid model that supports long-term landscape scale initiatives, to implement a district-wide prioritisation process, to develop coordinated and transparent funding mechanisms, to invest in capacity building and infrastructure, to fund strategic interventions in relation to weeds, ungulate and land protection, to design fit-for-purpose monitoring and evaluation frameworks, to prioritise equity and inclusion in investment, to communicate clearly and build public trust, and to pilot, learn and adapt as we go. The strategic framework aims to provide a clear vision and intent for what it is that we're in governance via a multi-agency steering group. It provides investment criteria to follow and a framework for measuring success and progress towards outcomes, including reporting needs. On this slide, we cover off the principles or the how of our approach to delivering landscape scale biodiversity protection and restoration across the Christchurch district. These principles were created through engaging with mana whenua and the community. These principles are outlined on the slide, which I will take as read just in the for timeliness purposes. The strategic framework also goes on to outline the desired outcomes or the what of what we are setting out to achieve. These have been outlined on the slide again, and for the purpose of time, I'll also take these for read. Now, I do apologise. The map that you have been provided with has been updated. So the map up on the screen also includes the Christchurch district boundary, which was a request after feedback from the chair. The tactical plan focuses in on 6 biodiversity landscapes spread across the Christchurch district. Please note the numbering does not indicate any form of prioritisation. Rather, the numbers simply enable the associated legend. The 6 landscapes are Kaitariti Spit, Te Waihora Wairua Catchment, Whakaraupo Lytton Harbour, Waimakariri River to Brooklands Lagoon, including the Styx and Otakai Kinoa, the Banks Peninsula Coastal Cliffs, and Akaroa Harbour, and Opawaho Ihutai Estuary Catchment. The vision is to have 6 landscape-scale biodiversity strategies spread across the district, created in partnership with mana whenua and the existing community groups working in these landscapes. These strategies will provide direction in terms of what the community would like to achieve within the landscape and align the community groups with a shared vision and clarity of how together we can achieve more. These strategies do not necessarily need to be created by us. In some cases, they may be more of a master plan collating the relevant strategies, enabling initiatives to join up, and in others, an appropriate strategy may already be in place. Ultimately, the desired approach is not just to see improved biodiversity in these landscapes, but to do so in a way that sees these improvements protected for generations to come. Ideally, once strategies or master plans are in place, community groups may then be able to take over management of funds to deliver on these strategies. Reflecting on yesterday, we've seen some reference to contestable funding as how we get this funding into the community, enabling them to deliver. But there is more than one way to do this. We can have people apply as individual community groups, or we can look to align community groups as they relate to our priority landscapes. Once the appropriate strategies or master plans are in place, we can then potentially financially support these community groups and mana whenua to undertake delivery in a structured form. With that in mind, the strategic framework created with mana whenua and the communities currently proposes a hybrid 80-20 model. That is 80% direct project delivery and 20% contestable fund. The 80% over time could potentially be directly delivered by the community groups under the relevant strategies. This would effectively increase the amount going direct to the community over time, but do so in a way that encourages alignment and working towards a greater goal. We may be able to do this sooner rather than later with the likes of Whakaora Healthy Harbour. They have a clear vision and plan, they have good governance model, and we feel confident that through this, money will be appropriately allocated to enable the desired outcomes. The strategic framework also outlines the need for a steering group, mentioned earlier. There is potential for a councillor to be on this group. It would be part of the role of this group to approve the allocation of funding to the various landscapes. This slide, again, apologies, this slide was not in the pack that went out. It was a late addition. And there's a lot of information on the slide, and it will also be provided after this so that you have a copy of it to take away and look at more in depth. If there are those of you who are super keen-eyed, you may notice that there's one missing off it, which will be added into the one that you receive after this. So this was, again, put together at late notice. So what we have on this slide is all of the applications received for last year's contestable fund. And this slide acts as a little bit of a sense check to see whether or not our landscapes align with where the community groups have been requesting funding. We're happy to see that with the exception of a small cluster associated largely with the Avon River, almost all applications fell within one of the proposed priority landscapes. The total value of the applications received last year was a little under 1.5 million, which could be an indicator that we need to look at how we can enable the community to be more aligned, focused and efficient. With that, if it is okay with the chair, I would like to now assign councillors into smaller groups with assigned facilitators and locations within the council chamber.
Oh, good. I just got a couple of questions. Are they clarification questions? Because just be mindful, if we go too long here, we won't be able to have a workshop. So I've got Claire, Joe, and you got one too. Okay, make them quite concise, please.
Well, mine was just around the mapping and the numbers, but I'm not sure how widespread this map's going to get, because I definitely agree that using numbers is a little bit misleading from a prioritisation point of view. But I notice in your later edition here that the additional to our slide pack, you've used ABCD, which I think is probably a smarter tool to be using. So that was really just my comment. So changed when I saw the following slide.
Thanks, Claire. Joe?
Yeah, I'm pretty supportive of this approach. I'm just wondering the rationale around not having the Avon or Takaro corridor included.
Just through the engagement processes that we undertook, it was seen as obviously we have to be, we're trying to be as focused as possible, and it was seen as we would get better biodiversity gains through the landscapes that we've outlined.
Well, I will be pushing for a change to that, because we can even see in this map the number of applicants on that corridor, and we know that the massive project that it is. So, yep.
Thanks, Joe. No.
Tēnā koe, Carl. E mihi atu kia koutou o te ringaraupa o Mahanui Kurutaio, no mahara mai. Just a clarification is that what I heard was that the direct consultation was with Rāpaki o Te Raki Whakaputa, Ngāti Wheke, and also Onuku Runanga. So do we take it that the other Runanga were actually represented by Mahanui Kurutaio?
Oh, you need to come up. Sorry, because people online can't hear. Yeah, it's all good.
Initial consultation was undertaken with Henare at Mahanui, and then the invitation for the workshops was sent out to all the runanga, but it was only Ngāti Wheke and Onuku that were able to attend them. So Mahanui went on behalf of the rest.
Kia ora for that. Was Whiti Ora also included in that?
No, at that time, Tuhuriri was still under Mahanui.
At the time, yeah. But going forward, I'm sure that can change. All good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that. John?
Just a quick question. Of the unsuccessful applicants, were any of those applicants receivers of money in previous, disbursements from Environment Canterbury? My question is, has anyone been sort of cut off in the new process? That was...
Through the chair, I don't have that information at hand. If you would like, I can go away and look into it. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Vicky?
Yeah. Well, one question under the key insight for the Heathcote, or for so I think actually pests like rats and stuff like that around the river edges and the estuary are really critical. It would be interesting to see that map in terms of the applicants for funding, categorised by whether they pick up on those projects on weeds, ungulates, other pests, and see how they match up with those target areas as well and our target key insights. It's just a thought. In terms of the Avon or Takaro, also I was thinking that surely is in the estuary catchment, so it seems weird to chop it out. And I have had conversation recently about where Christchurch's opportunity for something like Zealandia might be. And the suggestion was that actually the Avon corridor and wetlands, and that could be somewhere where you could create something connecting up through to Travis wetlands and the like that could have a really big ecological outcome. So I would just raise that as well as to think about. Yeah.
Thanks, Vicky. I've just got Ian first, and then Ian.
Thank you, Craig. And my question's along the lines I asked yesterday and told to hold it over here. And that is, have you got a view as to the efficiency of the use of the ratepayers' money in terms of the difference between a direct funding and contestable funding?
Through the chair, my personal view is that greater efficiencies could be gained through a more strategic approach than just contestable funding. I think that can result in a lack of alignment, although I do acknowledge that there are other benefits to that approach.
And from what you said in your introduction, that getting that efficiency is a critical part of how you're selecting projects, is it?
Through the chair, I think because we have such a limited budget, we want to be trying to achieve as much as we can with it.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Nook.
Yeah, thank you. Just a potential conflict of interest is that I am the chair of the Ihutai Ahuwhenua Trust. And the question here is that, and it probably comes along the lines of Councillor Davies, is that we talk about mana whenua. The real mana whenua, particularly within the Ihutai, is actually represented by the Ihutai Ahuwhenua Trust. And so that would be another inclusion of mana whenua along with tangata whenua. So that, I just want to make that point, and that could be taken into account when actually considering extra or more credible representation.
Yeah, it is actually a good point, because in the NPSIB it does talk about specified Māori land, and I think within this catchment you do have Māori reserves as well, and I'm a trustee of the 1A2B block in Rapaki as well, so I've got some conflicts. I'm also the co-chair of Te Ara Kakariki, which I can see on there. So, I think all of us are involved in certain things in this area, but it is a really important point that the Māori reserve lands aren't represented by their runanga completely. Runanga have a different role. They don't look after our Māori land. So that is good to know that, and to go directly to those trusts that look after those lands, as Nook has pointed out, because they're doing the work on the ground, not the runanga. I think I had Claire as well, but I'll go to you, Greg, just because you haven't spoken before. Yep.
Yeah, very briefly. So is that worth doing? I know Joe, for example, is the chair of the Estuary Trust. I'm involved with a couple of groups. Is that worth at least being out there with it, so that it's on
record?
record?
We're not making decisions, but yeah, hey, if people want to do a round of confessions, that's all good with me. Yeah.
Sorry, just to be clear, we're talking about a strategy here.
Yeah, I agree.
We're not anywhere near funding community groups or contestable funds. So, maybe the next council, which unfortunately Burns won't be on, might be closer to those conversations.
Yeah, look, I'm not suggesting you've got a conflict of interest. What I'm suggesting too is the more open we are about our affiliations to our outside organisations, it's a good thing to be public. That way, if later on someone says, "Oh, but hey, everyone's open on the way through."
But Greg, it is. Yep. It's all good. We didn't need to do it today because we're not making decisions, and I wasn't actually involved with my trust's application because I was kept out of it. So all good. Should we? Oh, I just had one other. Oh, Claire, over to you. Sorry,
I just regarding the map and some workshopping that we're going to do, and I don't know whether you've got another slide there or not, Carl. Is that, and you alluded to in your presentation about aligning ourselves with other funding agencies, and I guess for this particular area would be Christchurch City Council, which I think I know they spend a heck of a lot of time on the Avon and the red zone in that area. So I just wonder whether you've got something that you can pop up or inform us for perhaps a bit of a discussion, because we've heard one councillor say he wants to push a particular issue, but if we start getting too much overlay or without the background knowledge, I think it'd be a little bit unhelpful.
through the chair, while I don't have another slide to put up on that matter, we have been in discussions with Christchurch City Council about their biodiversity contestable fund, and how we can look to align contestable funds in the future due to the where they're at in the process this year. That won't be happening this year, but we will enter into a discussion in future years about whether there is an appropriateness and alignment.
And I think also I picked up the multi-agency steering group would be good to have a CCC person on it too. Potentially, that's just an idea to throw out there. Can we go to the workshop now? I think we should do that. And then we'll discover some of those things that Claire's just raised as well. Now, I know we've got scheduled 20 minutes left, but I do know that if people look at the schedule today, lunch is meant to be at 12:15. That could be pushed to 12:30 without too much problem, so we can still give this a good shot. So, Carl, over to you to split us up. And I know that we've got Paul and Yayan. You've been sent a link, well, all of us have been sent it actually, but for you to join a separate page so you can have your own group offline with a certain person. Yeah. Oh, with Jude. There you go. So over to you, Carl.
Cool. So we're about to put you into groups, but in these groups you will discuss two key questions. These questions, again, are not for decision, but rather to help inform and enable us to make the best decisions. You'll be given 10 minutes per question. So Tim will inform us when it is time to shift to the second question. After we've completed that, we will have one counsellor from each of the groups just give a brief on the key messages that they put together as a group, and we do have to be brief. And then we'll finish off by an open questions and discussion period at the discretion of the chair after that. So I'm just going to go through the groups now, and maybe I'll just briefly introduce you to the facilitators so that you know who to look out for if you haven't already met them. So we have behind me Tom and Zoe and Sean, and I'll also be a facilitator here in the room. Jude will be a facilitator online for councillors Cranwell and Deche. So my group of will include Chair Pauling, Councillors East, who's not here, Councillor McKenzie and Councillor McKay, if you could join McKay shortly. Zoe will have Deputy Chair Swiggs, Councillor Davies and Sunkel. Tom, Councillors Robertson, Korako and Ward. And Sean, Councillors Burns, Southworth, Scott and Edge. So we'll get you, if I can get the facilitators to just find a space in the room, and councillors, if you can please find your way to the facilitators.
We can use the council lounge as well.
Okay, let's go, people. Find your facilitator and find a space.
Who do I have? I have Pauline East.
Oh, can I have a comfortable one, too? Thank you. It's probably much more
There's nothing stopping multi-year grants being undertaken for 3 or 4 years at a time, depending on the property business plan and the property business plan. I just don't want to lose that political oversight. Because it is what the whole purpose of it.
Well, for me, it's not so much a political oversight as a community,
community oversight.
Community oversight. So, to Dion's point of 100% contestable but multi-year deals with this certainty, here's a 3-year or 4-year program, but it is a 3 or 4-year program, and then we reassess, prioritise, or
Would that kind of go against that wanting to leave room?
But it leaves the opportunity for the smaller group or the startup or the community to come in, get some work done, proof of concept and show that they can work, and then when the bigger funds become available again for contest, it may go back to where it's been, or others may be able to go, we've actually shown what we're achieving in this catchment to provide an outcome. So I'm just scared that it gets stuck in a space. And I know that when we do the Central Plains disbursements, we Tiara Kakariki always popped up, and it's really easy to go, there they are, because they have 5 projects in that bundle and 3 in that one and 4 in that one. You go, oh, we'll just give it to them because they tick all the boxes, we know the work's going to be done, and they take the money, where you've got another 10 or 15
Okay, kia ora koutou. We're going to come back to the big group now. Okay, we'll do a quick roundup around each group. So shall we start with, is our online group happy to give a little feedback, Jan or Judith? If not, I can give you another quick minute and we can go to group
Jan
4.
said he'll do that.
Okay, Jan, do you want to give a quick 30-second summary of what you thought on question 1 and 2? Okay, let's carry on. So we'll go to group 4, which was Vicky, Grant, etc. Who's doing that one?
Sorry, I'm just looking at we've got, so, it's, sorry, it's a bit confusing. We've got 80,
Okay, do you want to go to another group? Or?
Yeah, go to someone else remote. Let me sort.
Nick, you're putting your hand up. Let's go. What group are you?
Tom's.
3, group 3. Yeah,
Right.
Cool.
So I'll keep it very brief. So the first one, we thought 80-20 or similar, because if you dilute it too much more than that, you're getting below 100,000 per group. Also would want the applicants to have a previous track record and high priority on groups that maybe had some existing funding to cover overhead. So all the money that came from the fund would all hit the ground. So yeah, that's basically it covered.
Cool. Do you want to do question 2 as well?
And Genevieve's got the other half.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Oh, not on? Okay. Thank you, Tom, for running a good wee group. Collaboration, treaty representation, co-funding in kind. I'm not actually sure what that bit means, but anyway, that's all right. Limited for now. Okay. To the target 6 areas. So we need to just concentrate on those at the moment. But a review could align in 3 years with the review of the LTP and that sort of scenario to identify new emerging areas. So, yeah.
Thanks, Genevieve. Okay, Vicky, are you ready?
Yes.
Group 4, where you go?
So question 1 about the 80-20 split, we felt that was good, but 80 perhaps is the minimum, and to just keep a review on what other contestable options there are. So we've got like the CWMS and the Y Fund, for example. So just keeping an eye on that, because the 80 does deliver on the big landscape stuff, but important to keep some contestable. Did you want the second one?
Yep.
Yeah, second one as well then. So felt that it should be broader than just to the areas that have been identified for the key landscape scale, that then creates the opportunity for those who are contributing to the targeted rate in their areas to have some access to some funding. That it would be helpful to really understand what the CCC, for example, are doing, and make sure that we do align collectively and help with that direction and making sure we get the most out of all of the options. think that was pretty much it.
Thanks, Vicky. We'll come back to you, Jan. You ready?
Hi, kia ora koutou. Just acknowledging the beautiful picture on the slideshow there. Craig, you would identify that spot. Hey, yeah. So me, myself, and I had a great chat with Jude on this one. Initially, because I like this year 60-40. I mean, there was allowed a bit of funding to be contestable, but thinking about being strategic and looking at 10 years, for the next 10 years, that actually, if you do have 80% direct project delivery, that you can actually kind of make a difference and actually bring groups together, especially in those 6 landscape areas. So if that 80% direct project delivery was for those 6 landscaped areas, you could actually make an impact. And 20% contestable fund, yeah, I'm happy with that. And also that 20% contestable fund could be available for the whole rohe, not just for the 6 areas. So 6 areas can apply for that 20%, but it'll also open up to other areas as well, because I heard before discussions from Councillor Davies and Councillor Korako that there'll be some areas outside of those 6 landscape areas that could be or want to apply for funding as well. Kia ora.
Thanks, Jan. Well done. Group 2, Dion, Joe, John.
Thank you. We had a good conversation here, and not total agreement, but we sort of came to a conclusion. We understand the need to balance the efficiency of direct project delivery with the community engagement of the contestable fund. We need to keep room for smaller, less well-supported community groups alongside the large programs that we have in there. We kind of debated whether it was 20-80 or 70-30, and a bit of our thinking is if it's directed at those major landscapes, that's great. But if we really want, as Environment Canterbury, to uplift, create new community groups, people with ideas, thoughts and whatever, we really need some of that contestable funding for them to build. And if some of that direct work was done on those significant catchments, what's the timeline? Do they become contestable again in 3, 4, 5 years of project length? We may have groups that pop up and start to do some really good things that could then contest into the future because of proof of concept or what they're doing and change in landscape. So just some thinking there. And as to question 2, proposed approach for implementation, mixed views. We support the 6 landscapes, as we said before, but equally we really want some community engagement involvement to further improve, further increase the engagement within the community. And there is a wee bit of risk of capture. So if we decide those are the 6 catchments and those are the 6 groups that are doing the work, what about the rest and opportunity? Sound a bit like a socialist, but I've looked at other disbursements and things that I'm doing. We have entities like Te Ara Kakariki. Brilliant. Yep, you're there. And we go, well, that's really simple. We know them. We know where their costings, where their workers and the work they're doing. And it's really simple to go, we'll give them some more money, sitting alongside maybe another 8 or 10 different ones. We go, I'm not sure. So it's just there's a wee bit of conscious bias drops in at times if we're constantly going back to the groups that we know. And we also just noted here that we should consider the Avon-Otakaro as a priority area.
Kia ora. Thanks, John. So for our group, in terms of question 1, we were sort of most interested in whatever's going to be best bang for buck, really. What's the most effective use of the money? We sort of thought that maybe to get to 80 over time would be a good aspiration to get to. But we're worried that if you went straight from, say, the 400,000 contestable down to 200 in 1 year, that the community might go, oh. But I think it could be explained if you are dragging some of that contestable funding from this year into a direct funding model. So some of those community groups are going to the other side, so to speak. So we think that could work. So that's important. But again, it all comes down to, at the end of the day, match funding was important from our group. So that's an important indicator. And of course, obviously focusing in on the key areas and key issues. In terms of number 2, I think Claire and I were aligned. I mean, Ian was like, we should focus on the 6 areas and that should be the focus. But we felt that if you did that, then the community might go, okay, we'll just target those areas then and don't target the whole of Christchurch. That could be an argument you get back to you. So you have to have, well, we felt, Claire and I, to keep the applications open, but have heavy weighting towards those 6 areas in the assessment process. Maybe even up to 50% weighting towards those things or higher. But we also did give a plug for the Otakaro and said as a possible solution, you could just do the Opa Waho and Otakaro as a corridor approach rather than the whole catchment. It's a slightly different concept, but focusing work along the corridor of those 2 rivers rather than the whole catchment, that could be a way to solve that. Yeah, and inclusive of the estuary, yep. So that's just a way to think about it. Anything else, Ian or Claire? And
not treat the shaded areas as a hard line.
True.
Have soft boundaries, so you can be flexible.
And we felt that the other, similar to the last group, that by keeping it open to the whole community, you can allow for innovation and change over time, because you might get a group that comes through and you go, actually, that's a good thing. And I think another group said about a review at some stage. So you could always be reviewing those boundaries and seeing what's coming from the community. So that was our feedback. Anything else, Claire?
Only that we thought that to get the best bang for our buck, that we might work very closely with CCC and maybe just look at one agency distributing biodiversity funds within the bounds of Christchurch District Councils. So
we thought that you could move that part of the contestable fund and just give it to CCC and say you distribute it with a person from expertise from ECAN being on that committee that does it. That's one way you could think about it. Ian? Or even other agencies, true. Greg, you got a question?
Yeah, no, I just was going to follow up slightly on that. We did think too that with some of that, the idea about it being broader across the whole of the city area, if you like, one of the things could also be weighting towards particular types of work, because there are hundreds and thousands of groups that want to plant trees, and there are hundreds of thousands of people want to do all sorts. But if you said things like sedimentation, for example, mitigation of sedimentation, or as an example, something that sort of is that landscape style that's afforded by, doing work on that. That could be another way of working.
I agree, Greg, and I suggested that comes through, and like a map could have icons on it to show what groups are doing, what are they actually doing. They're doing fencing, pest control, weed control, planting, coordination. There's other categories, but then we'd know, and also that should be part of the weighting, I agree, towards those key issues that in the key insights slide that we raised, weed and ungulate control, et cetera, like those things should be the weightings for the rest of it. Geographic's one thing, but it's also species and issues that we're actually trying to deal with in terms of outcomes. Is there anything else we want to wrap up with, or any insights from the team? And I'm conscious we probably should finish because we're a bit over time, but
just in the interest of time, there's probably nothing to add other than really excited with some of what's come through from this, and we'll have to look at how best to implement it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, team. I think there is some common themes there across all the groups, so I think that should be really helpful in working out the next years for the... And Vicky, I'll let you have the last.
Sorry, Darren, there was just one other thing that I forgot to say that was a pertinent point raised in our group, which was around actually looking when there's something coming forward and something that needs funding, just check what the most appropriate source of funding is, whether it is this biodiversity targeted rate, or we also have like regional park funding already through the UAGC. We have the Y Fund, we have whatever the format, the zone committee funding comes back in. So just that's always a first check.
Yeah. And Whakaropo's got another source of funding and all that, so that is important. And just a mihi to our Mahanui Kurataio Kai Mahi as well. Thanks for being here with us. Really awesome to see that collaboration happening. So tēnā koutou. Kia ora, everybody. Thank you. And let's give your sheets into the team. Ka. And we'll start again at 1:15 with our, we're going into the PX briefing. Yep.